All right, good morning, everyone. Today, I believe we're in our 6th webinar of our webinar series, and today we're going to talk all about DARCA. We're going to kind of go into a couple different avenues here. Get my presentation loading. So for our members who are watching and don't know, I am Amber Weber. I am the Executive Director, and we're going to kind of look through a few things here. Where we've been, it's not going to be a comprehensive history by any means. We'll kind of talk about what we're doing now and then where we're going. So we've been around for 19 years now, and that's super exciting, but we're also still kind of in our baby stages. It began in 2001 by Karen Rademacher. She saw a need and did something about it, and I love that about DARCA, that we've always been action-oriented. We don't just focus on fluffy stuff, but we really want to help people. And that's really at the heart of our mission. So that was started way back in 2001. We've had a couple of executive directors and we've gone through some struggles, but I really see us moving upwards and forwards. And all of that has really laid the groundwork for where we are now. So that's a very brief history. And if members or anybody else is curious about what DARCA has done and what we've been involved in, you can absolutely ask us and we can get more in detail. So this is where we are now. I want to point out that this is a lovely picture and it just demonstrates how much fun we have. DARCA is absolutely a fun organization. We're not stuffy like some of the others. But I did become executive director back in April of 2019, so it's only been about a year and a half. And in that year and a half, we have focused on getting social media out there so we can reach more people and really know what everybody else is getting into. We've dove into workshops on a regional scale, though those were put off on hold for a little bit due to COVID-19. We had our latest conference here in 2020 right before the state shut down, so we were thankful that we got to have that before everything went crazy. And then we've been hosting these webinars. We have made awesome DARCA gear, which I'm sporting today. So if you're interested in cozy and comfy DARCA gear and supporting us, you can get that as well. Some of the things that we're really focusing on is water quality, making sure that producers aren't going to be regulated through that and that we can help them through those voluntary measures. That also includes the PFAS conversation that has been going on with our groundwater, WOTUS, and all that means. And we're working with CWC on that just to make sure that everybody knows what's involved, making sure that agriculture stays exempt like it has been in the past and that we don't have more regulation, more permits, etc. We've worked on 811 legislation, and I don't know how many people out there know, but we do have a Colorado Water Congress partnership that allows us to have reciprocal membership back and forth. So that's super neat for us, and we get to kind of build on that. That was made a few years ago, and we get to build on that and really pave the way there. We've also done some new rates and benefits for members and sponsors. We want to make sure that our members and sponsors are taken care of and that we are beneficial to them. We don't want to just be another water organization. Yesterday I heard from somebody on the West Slope and they said, you know what, there's DARCA and there's a million other nonprofit water organizations and we all do the same thing. And so I really took that to heart and I want to make sure that we are different and we give something to people. And then last, we're a family, which I think is a little bit different than other organizations. That's one of the things I'd like to keep and foster as we continue forward. We have added a couple new awesome faces to DARCA. We have Teresa Rink, who is our finance director. She's our accountant and is doing a really great job. She came on with us a couple months ago. And then Michaela Fenton is our communications director. So she's helping us curate content for our social media and just doing a lot of really cool things. And we really appreciate both of those people. About 6 months ago, maybe closer to 10 months ago now, the board of directors met And we decided that one of the things we needed to do was make our board of directors more intentional. Prior to that, we just kind of said whoever wants to be a board member can absolutely do that. And it's still kind of that way, but we have broken it into basins that kind of are modeled after the Colorado Water Conservation Board model. And so you can see there in blue all of the different basins that we have. And there's a couple that we've kind of put in to the South Platte, so it's a little bit bigger than you would normally see. The Metro and South Platte region has 2 voting members, as does the Arkansas, because they're the 2 largest watersheds, and then everybody else has a voting member in there as well. We have, excuse me, all those blue dots you see are our non-voting members. So we really want to make sure that we have those ex officio seats because they bring so much to our board. And we didn't want to just add a ton of people, but we are very intentional in who we add. And we have a really great board. And you can see them here. Here's our newest set of board of directors. You see some faces that have become quite familiar over the years, and a couple new people as well, Jennifer Wellman, Kevin Salter, Shanae Polo, and others. So we have a really great and diverse board, and I'm so proud of our board. It's super unique, and we just get along really well, which is super important. We have a lot of knowledge in this group of people. So we've kind of put together a different or like a little brochure, if you will, of who DARCA is and what we do. Our mission has always been to be the definitive resource for networking, information exchange, and advocacy among ditch and reservoir companies and others. And we're really moving into this situation where we're not just ag, with more leasing in more cities buying ditches and having shares of ditches. We don't always just serve ag. We also serve our environmental community and our municipal community and really all sectors of ag. So really we are an organization that focuses on water in general and being that definitive resource and advocate for those members. And our vision is to increase our role in the different events and discussions and be a true stakeholder in a lot of those things. So that's kind of who DARCA is and what our vision is. And we just really hope that we are beneficial. So a part of today is really going to gain that feedback, what we can be doing better, where we can go from here, and just really making sure that we are that benefit. You can see some of our services here. We have a grant guide that we published. And of course, with COVID, that has changed a little bit in that information, but it's a resource that people can go to for a one-stop to get a variety of grants and people who can be contacted to support that. So that's super unique that we've been able to do, and we partnered with the Colorado Ag Water Alliance on that. I've talked about a couple of those other things too, but advocacy continues to be super important to us, and we find ourselves in a variety of situations where we are a little bit more involved than we used to, which is nice. So we do have those new rates up there, which we recently changed. We made it a little bit more simple because there were a million different things to consider when you became a member, and now we have 4 things, and you just need to know roughly what size ditch you are, and that's about it. So we made it more simple and easy to understand. And then we have some more lists in there. One of the things that is really neat about DARCA is that our sponsors really have a say in how we interact with them and how we push their products forward or their services. And if a member comes to me and says, hey, I need a really good lawyer, I can't just say, oh, go to this one guy, but I can say, hey, here are all the lawyers who sponsor DARCA and who are involved with DARCA. And we feel really confident giving our sponsors' names out to those members. And that's true of all sponsors. If they need pipe, I have some companies I can give them for piping, telemetry and flow meters, and you name it. We have a list of sponsors that we can say, hey, go to these people, we trust them. And that's really unique, and I really enjoy getting to share that information. And then also we have the DARCA website and a bunch of information on that, including the handbook and whatnot there. So kind of where we're going, we're updating our handbook. People are continuously asking for that and wanting that information, but we know that there are a few things missing and that needs to be updated. So we are definitely working towards that. More intentional education and outreach. We don't want to be just another webinar. We don't want to be just another conference that people go to. We want to make sure that the education and outreach that we do is meaningful to everybody involved. Advocacy, like I said before, that's a strong place that we find ourselves in, whether that's in the Colorado Water Congress world, whether that's me visiting with somebody and trying to see what I can do to help them. We just find ourselves in a bigger advocacy role than we have in the past. We're improving our bylaws, and we'll probably encourage our members to revisit theirs. After we spoke to Lauren Hicks, that was kind of a wake-up call saying, hey, revisit those bylaws and make sure that you're all squared away. So that's something that our members also need to consider. And then we're going to be talking about the Colorado Water Plan and that basin implementation plan and projects list that is going on right now through the Colorado Water Conservation Board. We've taken an active role in at least one basin, helping gather those projects and make sure that those projects are included. We've also been talking with Alex Funk with the Colorado Water Conservation Board and CAWA to see how we can make sure that ag is well represented in the Colorado Water Plan update, and just making sure that we are going where we should be going with that as well. So I am done talking now. It was a quick travel through time, if you will, of where DARCA has been, where we're at now, and where we're going. But I really want to open up the floor and start listening and taking notes from all of you to see where else we should be going, excuse me, where we could use improvement, maybe what DARCA is doing well, whatever feedback you have, I really want to hear it. This is a weird year. I want to know whether we should have a conference in person or not. I want to know if we are meaningful. Everything you have to say, I would love to hear it. So I'm going to stop speaking now, and you guys can feel free to unmute yourselves and start throwing it at me.
Thanks, Amber. Took me a minute to unmute, sorry.
That's okay. Thanks.
That was really nicely done. I like your presentation. The visuals are awesome, very clear conceptually. I wonder if you can expand a little bit before I give you, I mean, I have great thoughts after your presentation, but I want to understand more where you're coming from and where maybe DARCA has taken a position in the past on the waters of the US. And yeah, if you can just maybe cover a little bit of that, maybe for another few minutes. I'm just curious what the approach is to WOTUS.
Yeah, absolutely. And perhaps somebody who has been with DARCA longer than I can give the background of what we've done in the past. Right now, what we're doing is Colorado Water Congress and the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment are both visiting this issue of what is WOTUS, what are the gap waters, what happens if our stay is removed, all of those questions. So I have been involved in both conversations and talking about what that means for ag, really making sure, and not just ag, but also what it means for other people. What does it mean if we lose our stay with a 2008 rule? Where do we go? So I did a presentation at Colorado Water Congress last week or the week before. I'm involved in all those conversations, really just keeping the dialogue open. And if it turns into needing to be an advocate, then we can do that. Right now, we're just kind of sitting tight, hoping that nothing changes and kind of looking towards the future in a not so fast-paced way. So we're trying to just figure things out at this moment, but I'm actively engaged in those conversations. I don't know if that helps, Jennifer. Kirk, Manny, anybody else? Do we have any involvement in the past with WOTUS?
Amber, this is Manny, and I think you did a very nice job explaining where we are today. What we did in the past was very minimal, I would say. we just did some position papers and a few things like that. So I think that our moving forward answer that you gave is very beneficial.
Thanks, Manny.
And I would echo that, Manny. It seems like our role at DARCA is really that outreach side of things. There's just too many opportunities for irrigators in Colorado to fall in the cracks of this type of information. And I know that even since DARCA was developed 12 years ago, just the amount of information available to folks about changes in WOTUS and but I think we would fail our membership and all irrigators in Colorado if we didn't make things available to them so that they do know what kind of impacts that they might see with changes with WOTUS. And at some point, I do believe that DARCA is the voice of that ditch and reservoir owners. And so if we can gather them and the knowledge that we have and sharing that information in a concise fashion, because it's too complicated. And if we don't bring it to the level that they're able to understand and digest in a short period of time, we're going to lose an opportunity to make a difference with that. So yeah, I think great presentation. I love this. You're doing a dynamite job, Amber. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirk. And I want to add on to that as well, Jennifer. I failed to mention that also in the WOTUS piece, Colorado Water Congress and DARCA are joining together to put on another webinar series focused on WOTUS. Our first one is probably going to be what needs a permit and why do you need a permit, that type of discussion. Our hope is to also put together a video that can just be housed for years and years that kind of describes where we've been and where we're going and why does WOTUS matter. So that's also something that we're putting together. We're hoping probably November-ish to start kicking that off.
Okay. Yeah, I was not aware that there were any potential changes being made to agricultural exemption, and I think it is helpful for ditch owners, especially those that are trying to do work to improve their irrigation efficiency. To have to go through the hoops of CDPHE is often troubling and it's time consuming and it's hard to know exactly what's covered and what's not. So I like that idea of having more capacity to explain that. But there are so many benefits to WOTUS that are potentially being scraped that is a concern for ag as well, because it concerns the floodplain and wetlands on private property, being removed essentially from this Clean Water Act. And I'm glad that you're involved and, understanding the nexus between environmental protections and agricultural protections is really, really critical that a lot of people have misconceptions about. So thank you. That's great.
Yeah, of course, Jennifer.
Amber, this is Manny again. Kurt touched on something there that where we're going in DARCA that is a concern of the board, and that is a lot of times we'll have a change in the law that comes up, and it might affect agriculture in one manner. It might affect the municipalities in another, and where's our position on it, and what should we do? We've discussed quite a bit in length whether DARCA should take a position or if we should just be getting that information to, let's say, all people, all organizations, because it's controversial between maybe one ditch company to another, or possibly ditch companies to Colorado Water Conservation Board or whatever. So that part is one of really trying to get information out so that the ag people can respond, even if it's in a negative way. I shouldn't say that, but in a way that's going to hurt them, so they can voice their opinion and get that to to the legislature if necessary.
Absolutely, Manny, and that's a great point. As we move through our advocacy work, last year we tried to implement it and then COVID kind of just messed everything up everywhere. But we really tried to implement a system where we would send out all the information on a non-biased level so people can make a decision for themselves. I never want to say DARCA is supporting this and you should jump on board. I want to make sure we provide the information, and I want to provide that avenue for feedback so that they can say, yes, we support it, no, we don't, give feedback, that sort of thing. So we'll be trying to figure out what, I guess, logistically works best for ditch companies to be able to do that. Legislation often moves very quickly. So just getting people on board and knowing where to look and knowing how to provide that feedback is going to be important. So yes, Manny, I agree. And thank you for mentioning that, because we're going to be solidifying that in the coming months as well.
Well, Amber, I think with the social media platform that you're working with, in the future, we'll be able to reach out to a lot of people. The thing is, we just need to get more looking at our Facebook or our web pages so that they know that we're active and we're trying to bring that information to them. If they can then respond to us with the social media that you have going, it's going to be so much faster, and we may be able to approach the legislative body and voice our concerns in a more unified front than we have in the past.
Absolutely, because right now we kind of don't take a stance unless we absolutely see a really big impact to one of the sectors. So right now we're just focusing on education and not so much voting for or against until we get a general consensus for the membership, or unless the board really feels like we need to take a stand. So if we can get a little bit more feedback, that would be great too. What other feedback do you guys already have? And thanks, Michaela. She also put in the chat our platforms for social media on there. So take a chance to follow us there.
I was recently asked a question about different forms of irrigation that could conserve water so that you could actually irrigate more acreage. For example, the K-line system. I don't know if anyone on this call is familiar with K-line or has used it. It goes away from wheel and flood irrigation and puts water into pipe that you move around. I guess you can irrigate by cells and move it around with an ATV or a UTV, but it conserves water, but also allows a producer to irrigate more and potentially make more money off of, you know, the same amount of water. So I'm wondering if we could look at some of those cost-effective and, you know, potentially beneficial water conservation methods in irrigation, because it's kind of coming about in the conversations with demand management, at least on the western slope. And I'm curious what research we might be able to either support or get people involved in that conserves water and also enables expansion potential.
Absolutely.
Jennifer, you really walked into one there. I think our state engineer, they have an opinion about conserving water and adding more acres. And there might be a new trend that I'm not aware of, but in the past, we have on the Arkansas the efficiency rules, which basically if you improve your ability to apply water with less water, you can't open up more ground. Now, with demand management, that might be a different thing. And I'm sorry I started to run over Paul. Paul might have something to better update us on, so I'll get out of here.
Manny, it's my understanding that you are correct statewide as far as irrigating new ground. I was going to make the comment that I think we need to be quite precise with our terms like conserving water and saving water, because those are highly defined terms in the water world. For instance, conserve water means to consume less. And so typically when one conserves water, you either cut down tamarask trees that are using a lot of it, or you actually irrigate less. Conserving water often has the implication of fallowing, and I don't think that's where you were headed, Jennifer. So
Right.
I think you were headed more on the idea of irrigation efficiency. Irrigation efficiency can indeed lead to having more water available for applying better to existing lands, or I should say more fully to existing fields, or in your example, if it would be allowed to apply to lands that haven't been irrigated before. But demand management and much of the management of the Colorado River Basin is focused on the term, when they talk about conserving water, it means not consuming as much. So I guess I made my point there. Actually, to answer your question, I am familiar with K-lines. I've never used one, but I've seen them. They are basically a heavy-duty lawn sprinkler that you move around, often pulling with an ATV. I typically see them in small field situations. I don't believe that they would replace that center pivot that's shown on Amber's screen.
Yeah, there was an application in Wyoming where it had actually replaced the flood irrigation system.
Well, if I can add on here too, I know here in Kansas in the 1990s, working for the Division of Water Resources, people used to be able to irrigate 1/4 flood irrigated 320 acre feet flood furrow irrigation. Well, they put up a center pivot, and they're no longer watering 160 acres, they're watering about 120 acres. And they found that they had water left over. So they looked at that dryland corridor next to them and added another pivot and started watering there. Well, then we started looking at the use of the water, and they were using more water on those 240 acres than they were on the 160, year in, year out. So that goes to that point of, conservation versus expansion. So that's one of the things that we did here in Kansas, is we didn't allow the expansion of our authorized irrigated acres because of the increased usage. Even though the pivots were more efficient, they were using more water on the land. So that's one of the things that, and both Paul and Manny mentioned the situation here in the Ark River Basin, the Colorado side, and in Kansas was a large part of that because of the need for Kansas to see the water come downstream. Because again, if you're using your water more efficiently, and that means there's less water available downstream to those users that were relying on those return flows, whether that be in Colorado or coming across the state line into Kansas. As far as other efficiencies, we have a product here in Southwest Kansas called Dragon Line. And what that basically is they put in drip irrigation on lines that they hang off of the center pivot system. And then that allows them to, basically, it's one of those things that we talk about efficiencies, but a lot of times it's trying to find out how to best use that last drop of water. So as wells lose capacity and the ability to pump, they have to find better ways to put the water on the ground. And by using the drip irrigation system that they pull around the field with the center pivot, that is one way they can do it. But it is much more efficient than even the drop nozzles we're seeing on the graphic there.
Absolutely. I think that's a really great topic, and we should explore it for some further conversation and education and outreach.
I would like to make one further comment to Jennifer. Jennifer, this is not meant to squash a wonderful idea you have completely, especially up in your area where you're under free river conditions much of the time. There's nothing to preclude a irrigator from filing for another decree and irrigating land that wasn't irrigated before. But their existing decree is based on a consumptive use decree, not a consumptive use amount rather than a diversion amount. So in general, you cannot consume more water than you have been doing.
Great
I mean-
conversation. What else can we do at DARCA moving forward?
What kind of youth outreach do we do in terms of 4-H or educational series for kids? That I think ag education is a really critical thing that is not in all elementary or high schools. And I wonder if resources on that end, that would be a great grant to get to develop that kind of thing so that students understand ditches, and not just the ag kids who, you know, work their farms and understand ranching, but also the urban students and students that may not live on and have access to farmlands.
Yeah, absolutely. So we haven't done a whole lot of outreach. I was hoping we could work with the FFA and others to try to get them to our conferences, that sort of thing. There's a lot of programs already that do a lot of education and outreach to youth. So I don't know that there would be an opportunity for us to add something on our own, but perhaps make materials that we could give to those organizations. Yeah, I don't know. It's tricky because I don't want to saturate the market, so to speak. And a lot of those things are funded by CWCB already. And so it would be harder to get a grant for more of the same. But we can definitely explore it and see how we can be unique in that way as well. Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah, I haven't seen those outreach materials, but that'd be great.
Amber, along that same line, you know, bringing young irrigators or in that kind of training sense, I've always wondered, again, I like to stay focused on ditch and reservoir. I continue to push that because I think it was an interesting comment earlier. I think Manny said, you know, we've got municipal and we've got ag, and now we've got some environmental representation. And I think that blend and balance that DARCA has provides us power. I've always said in Colorado, if you have somebody or one entity that wins in regards to water, I think the state loses. I think our state has got to balance that across all of these important roles that water plays in our life. So that's why I love DARCA and where it's set up in that diversity. One of the things that, as was being discussed here, I've always wondered if a role that we could play is in the ability to help educate or train ditch riders or reservoir, what do you call them, the guys that live up high in the mountains and they're dealing with reservoir maintenance. I don't know that I've heard a lot of need for that, but I also don't know that there's been any organization set up to provide that. And I think that's, again, where we reside in that ability to talk ditch rider issues. And so I love the idea of bringing together that knowledge.
Thanks, Kirk. I appreciate that. I do know lots of people are struggling to find ditch riders now. It's hard to get somebody who is aware of a particular system, is willing to work in a different environment, that sort of thing. So I think we could find ourselves a little niche there.
I like that idea also. It could be very useful to help ditch riders understand what are their rights and not rights in the easement. And yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Perfect. Is there any criticism that anybody might have of DARCA?
Amber, this is not criticism. I'm looking at another problem that we're running out there, which is the urban encroachment one. we're finding a lot of the ditch companies who have laterals through an area, and as it becomes urbanized, the ownership of some of the laterals, water changes, and then the laterals aren't maintained. And there's been a couple of programs or setups where they do a dual system and take the irrigation water and run it parallel usually in a one of the homeowners associations. If they're a big block, they might run 2 lines, and then the water treatment plant doesn't have to make potable water for the water that's applied to lawns and whatever. That's one way to really improve the efficiency of the water in that area. But it's one that we find now that's a problem that a lot of these ditch companies are having an issue with multiple users who are non-ag on a lateral. And so that's an area that we might need to explore as well.
Absolutely, Manny. And I know a lot of people are saying, hey, do you have this agreement? Do you have some sort of a form that we could use, that sort of thing? So if we can help track down some of that stuff too, that could be a really great help. And I'm hoping that can go into the handbook as well. But yeah, urban encroachment is a huge deal and we can't stop it. So we need to figure out how we can all work together through it. What other comments or feedback, criticisms, positives, any of that we can take down and start working on as we move forward? I think the conference is one of the things that makes DARCA DARCA. When you walk into the room at a DARCA conference, you just feel so much different than walking into another conference, just because of that family atmosphere and the fun that we have. But with COVID-19, I don't know if it will be an option or not. What is everybody's thoughts? Preliminary, I'm not going to say, oh, Manny said, but what are some preliminary thoughts that people might have about the conference as we start getting ready to plan that?
I guess I wouldn't shy away from a virtual conference. I know there's been a number of people who have just canceled, and some of it was just because it was on the front end of the virus. But I noticed like the Colorado Water Users is canceled for this year. One of the big doings there in Vegas. You do miss that personal interaction, that feel that you just talked about. But one of the things, we might be able to reach more members. We may want to even see if we can reach out and pick some times about when we might, best have a conference, time of day even. If it'd be better to have an evening conference, or if we can stick with the daytime. One of the things that the virtual meetings have allowed me to do is attend meetings I normally wouldn't attend because of the travel time. It's not worth the 4 hours to sit in a meeting for an hour. So I think it's opened up some possibilities, and maybe if we can have the virtual conference and get people to attend, then maybe they'll attend in person next time it comes around to their area.
Yeah, Kevin, I think you make some good points. I also want to make sure that our members are accessing that as well. Throughout the webinar series, it's been primarily our professional water sector engagement, as opposed to the people actually out there touching the water. We won't be running water like we usually do when we hold our conference, so perhaps that would be better and increase our engagement that way. But it's a hard balance that we have to kind of figure out how we get people engaged. Manny, did you have something?
Yeah, Amber, I know that we're working with Colorado Water Congress more all along here, and they're doing their webinar. We might look at and talk to Doug and Shanae about what they're finding by having the virtual meeting and what the pitfalls might be. We could look into what they're doing and maybe model some of it with improvement if we can. And that might be a good place to start off from without just jumping into it and doing it. I think we could learn a lot from their experience.
Absolutely, Manny. And I've talked to him a little bit about that, but I can get more in depth on that. Anybody else have any? Yeah, Kirk.
I've had this in the back of my mind for quite a while, thinking and hoping that a lot of this will pass by the time we get into the late February timeframe. We are very dependent on the revenue to run DARCA that comes in from that conference. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the organizations are as well. My feeling is that we should at least try to run a hybrid version of that. It just seems just as easy to, that's probably not true, just as easy, but it would make sense to be able to camera set up what we show live to maybe an audience. I know the voices are tough to hear sometimes, but I think it would be worth it. I agree. I feel like it's a point where we should be turning the corner on getting together. So I guess I don't want to abandon the live version yet.
Thanks, Kirk. I'm kind of with you there too. I think if we can, we should try to do that as well. Anybody else have any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns about that? And I have sent out a survey kind of going over the conference and a couple other things to kind of see where we're going, because I knew not the whole membership, they wouldn't be able to make it today. So you can also find that on our website and in our newsletter. Maybe we can throw it up on social media as well. We aren't planning it yet. I probably won't plan it for another couple months. I have some ideas of what we might do and that sort of thing, but logistics haven't been figured out yet. So I'll constantly be thinking about that as we move forward. As we start to wrap up here, is there anything else that anybody kind of has on their brain that they want to mention to us before we hop off? And as always, you can email me, you can call me, however makes sense to you. We can do that as well, so you don't have to talk today, but if you do have something, please feel free to reach out to me. Yeah, Kirk.
Okay, I've got another one. Amber, now that you've been at the helm for a year, I don't know, are we a year yet? Seems like you've been doing such good work. It's longer than that. When we've toyed for years dealing with the idea of, can we put together an inventory or a yellow pages of services that are available to ditch and reservoir companies, and we struggled with that because we hesitate to endorse an engineering firm or a law firm or a contractor and things like that. But I just, again, trying to figure out if DARCA can provide a service to the type of industry that we work with, certainly with our financing that I'm part of with CWCB. There is a network of good, and then there are some that try to get into it and maybe don't fit well with a ditch and reservoir company and the way they need things done. So I guess I would like, again, to maybe breach that subject with the board and see if there's some way for us to put something together that walks that fine line between actually endorsing and yet making available for certain purposes.
Yeah, absolutely, Kirk. I think that's a great idea. Anything else that's burning to come out?
Amber, you've done a great job. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Manny. I love what I do. You guys make it easy and it's a ton of fun. So I'm glad you chose me to be a part of DARCA. All right, on that note, thank you all for taking time out of your day to talk to us and to help me figure out where we're going from here. You guys brought up a ton of really great ideas and some great feedback too. So we'll definitely be thinking about how we can get the ball rolling on a few of those things. So thank you for your time. And come back in about 2 weeks, we have Chuck Adams with One Up Drones coming to talk to us. So that should be a good time. It always is with him. So thank you guys. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thanks, Amber.